You're watching Chasing Justice with award-winning crime writer Synova Cantrell. This season on Chasing Justice, I am on the trail of America's cult leaders. Why do people follow these charismatic, narcissistic individuals? Why do their crimes go unpunished for so long? And more importantly, how can you protect yourself from the dangers of subliminal programming? I know you're going to enjoy the show, but before you do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. All of that BS really helps us defeat the algorithm monster. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a case that I thought I knew, but I was wrong. We're going to be talking about the tragedy around Jonestown. We're going to talk about the cult leader Jim Jones. Now, people had an idea of what happened here. Now, this happened just before I was born, but I was raised with all the headlines, all the newspaper articles. I was raised back in the day where, all of the stuff we see on social media now was actually in the tabloids around the checkout at the grocery store. So all the kids got to see all the pictures, got to see the headlines. I thought I knew the story of Jonestown, but I was wrong. People were told that Jim Jones was a good, charismatic preacher who really cared about people, cared about social injustice, and that he was a faith healer, and that somehow he just got addicted to drugs and went off the deep end and nobody could really understand. Well, I'm going to be starting a series of videos that could be 5, 6, maybe even 7 videos long. It could be even longer. I don't know how long it's going to be, because every time I start to research an aspect of the story, something new wakes up, something new opens up, and I can't find the end of this. Now, I'd like to tell you that I'm going to give you a lot of answers, but I'm afraid I'm going to give you a lot of questions too. We're going to see I keep wanting to say Joseph Jeffers because they were both initials JJ. Now, if you haven't watched my series on Joseph Jeffers, I just finished that series on that cult leader last week. And so you can watch those videos as well. This whole season of Chasing Justice is about cults in America. And the idea is we want to figure out how this happens. How do these cult leaders manipulate so many people? We want to figure it out so we can protect ourselves and protect those that we love. We want to see the red flags, and there's a giant one in this one that just breaks your heart. I know why people signed up for Jim Jones. I know why they signed up to join his church. They tell us. In some of the defectors, the people that had gotten out before the massacre, they told you exactly why they signed up. And we should, as humans, grieve for the reasons why they signed up. Jim Jones, on the outside, fought for social injustice. He fought for the fringes of society. He gave everyone a warm, welcoming embrace. He didn't care what color, creed you are, what side of the tracks you were born on, what kind of financial status you had. He had this facade of love and compassion that we should all have. And unfortunately, it was just a facade. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of things. So we're going to be talking about, was he actually a psychopath or a sociopath? Was he born that way, or was he created? His mother seemed to have some issues as well. We're going to be talking about, was this a nature versus nurture type of thing? But today we're going to really be talking about his childhood. Where did this person come from? And we're going to talk about some disturbing things. We're going to be talking about how could someone we label as a monster, how could he have done so many good things? See, we look back at his time in San Francisco, and he helped so many people out there. He would help drug addicts get off of drugs, and he would give them jobs and set their lives back up again. How could somebody like that order the deaths of over 300 kids in Jonestown? See that 908, 909 number that we've got of victims, of people that drank the Kool-Aid? We forget that 306, I think it was, over 300 of them were children that were given this by the guards or given this by parents. There was 300 children there, so you can't use the S word that YouTube has banned, which is ridiculous. It's still a word. You can't use the S word on those children. They didn't have the choice. that was murder. I contend it was murder of 918 people. So how could someone that we label as a monster, how could he have started out a church and ended up in San Francisco and ended up helping all these people? You know, he was fighting for social injustice. And so we want to say, this is a monster, this is a human. And we want to separate those things. We want to pretend like we understand that monsters are these big, grizzled, scary-looking things. But monsters are humans. And monsters look just like us. And sometimes those monsters can be cloaked in something actually good. And that's what's so scary. This video was going to be one of 2 or 3 videos that I made on Jim Jones. But after my study, I've got at least 6 videos laid out for you. I don't know, it may go longer. Why would I talk about this? Why would I want this to be, a part of my Cults in America series? Why would I do this? To me, I thought this is just a famous case everybody knows. Why would I do this? Well, did you know that there were 5 or 6 people, survivors of the Jonestown massacre, that tried to speak out after everyone was dead, that were murdered in their own homes for speaking out? Did you know about those cold cases? Most people didn't know. Did you know about the drug use and all these disciplinary meetings and the child beatings and everything that was going on in the church in San Francisco? I bet you didn't. So we're going to talk about this, and today I want to bring this forward because I hope to answer some questions. I hope to answer the question of why these people joined this cult in the first place. And I can tell you definitively why most of them joined. And the reason why I can say that is because some of these people have come forward and told you. And it's such a heart-wrenching reason that we as humanity, we should feel sorry for these people. We should feel ashamed that these people didn't receive what they needed from society and they ended up in a cult. So I feel like this story needs to be told because of those 900 and some odd people, but also because of all the hundreds of people that he affected along the way, and all of the people that may be getting close to joining a cult now. So we want to talk about this because we can't let, I think the number is 918. By the time you count the people that he had his followers shoot to death on the airstrip, I believe the number ended at 918, but I've seen some changes here and there. 918 people, almost 1,000 people were murdered by this man. And you can't use the S word for this. If someone is holding a gun to your head and says, you drink this poison or I'm going to shoot you, that is not the S word. that is not, yeah, you're not unaliving yourself. You're being forced to do something against your will. You are not, you're being murdered, and so the whole idea of mass, I hate that I can't say a word. Because YouTube is so stupid, it thinks that if you don't say a word, that it's going to magically disappear. Well, if you don't talk about mental health issues, they're going to get worse. So if somebody is having those kinds of thoughts of unaliving yourself or causing yourself this, I want you to call the hotline because you need to talk about it. Don't hide it. Don't avoid the subject. That's going to make it worse. Talk to somebody. There are strangers that care, and there is a hotline for you to call. I will make sure and add it to the video description. But here's what I want to talk about. You cannot call this that. They were murdered by Jim Jones. And what's even scarier is there were people outside of Jonestown that did this. I have to watch my... There were people outside of Jonestown, in Georgetown, that ran kind of a halfway house that ran between Georgetown and out in the jungle. Because this was so remote, they had kind of a stopping point in the city. those people killed themselves as well. And then, to make it even worse, they were supposed to get a call back to San Francisco, and all of his followers back there were supposed to do it too. One brave young man actually hinders that call from going out and may have saved hundreds of people in San Francisco. So this tragedy could have been even worse. So it's important that we don't forget this. It's important that we learn from everything we can from this, because it will happen again. See, this is the problem with not learning about history. We're doomed to repeat it if we don't understand what happened. And so that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about the childhood of Jim Jones, and we're going to try to decide, was he born this way? Was he created into this? Was he a psychopath or a sociopath? We're going to see what his narcissistic mother may have contributed to this. We're going to see if perhaps, how does he fit on this psychopathy scale? We're going to see, was he a full-blown psychopath? We're going to learn as much as we can about this boy's childhood, and maybe we can answer some questions. If not, we can at least find some red flags. I hope you watch this whole series. It's very disturbing. So there are going to be trigger warnings. I will do my best to keep it as clean as possible. I try to do that for all of my videos. Because I do have a lot of victims' family members that follow me, so I'll try to keep it as clean as possible. But we are talking about the Jonestown massacre, so if that offends you, or if that's disturbing to you, I encourage you to skip this series. Otherwise, please watch it. Please share it with people that you think it can help. James Warren Jones was born on May 13th, back in 1931. What was our first cult leader doing? See, this is a series all about cults in America. And in 1931, if you haven't been watching my series, the cult leader, Joseph Jeffers, he was raising Cain in Jonesboro, Arkansas. He was causing the church wars, the church riots. There would have been shootouts. There was somebody killed. The police, the pastor was tried to have an assassination attempt. The army finally had to come in and shut it down. It was a three summer ordeal called the Jonesboro Church Wars, and the cult leader that was ahead of that was named Joseph Jeffers. So this is right in the middle of the Jonesboro Church Wars with Joseph Jeffers. Right in the middle of that, there's another cult leader actually being born, and he was born in Indiana. He was born in Crete, Indiana. He lived on a small farm, and he was born May 13th, 1931. His dad's name was James. His mother's name was Lynetta. Now, Lynetta was kind of an unusual character. Lynetta had grandiose ideals about herself. She believed that she was better than everybody else and that she deserved more, and if it wasn't for the man keeping her down, she would have accomplished great things in this life too, because she had been reincarnated many times, and every time she was reincarnated as something grand. So she didn't really understand what was going wrong this time around. Of course, she also had grand schemes of becoming a world famous author. Now, she had these grandiose ideas, and she wanted to marry a rich man to take care of her. Now, of course, we're right on the cusp of the Great Depression, and there aren't a lot of rich men to take care of her. And she ends up marrying 2 or 3 times, and the third time she ends up marrying James. Now, James, I do not know why she chose James, other than he was a veteran. He'd just come back from World War I, but he had damaged his lungs so drastically with all the chemicals over there that he literally couldn't breathe, and so he had the lungs of an old elderly man, and so he was on disability, and he was getting military government benefits for his disability. So why she married him in the first place, I don't know. Maybe she had this idea that his family was well off. And they did provide them with the down payment to get a small farm. Now, unfortunately, neither one, Lynette or James, had any inclination to farm, and so they ended up losing it right at the beginning of the Great Depression, and they ended up moving into a little shack in Lynn, Indiana, which wasn't too far away. Now, James had no ambition to do anything. He spent most of his days at the local pool hall. Some people said he was an alcoholic. Some people said they never saw him drink. So there's conflicting stories there. But either way, everyone admitted he didn't have any ambition to do anything. He might do an odd job every once in a while when he felt like it, but he didn't really have any ambition to do anything. I don't know that I could say I would have much ambition if I had the lungs of a 90-year-old man. So again, no judgment there, but he didn't have any basic income, was just basic, simple disability. So his wife ended up being forced to go to work, and she was not happy about that because she was the princess. And so they ended up in Crete before they moved. Lynetta ended up getting pregnant, and she had this grandiose vision. She had been really sick and almost died, and in her near-death state, she dreamed she was on the river of life, paddling in the boat. Now, if anybody has studied the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you're supposed to be in these big Egyptian boats. I forgot the name of them. And you are slowly going down the river of life, and you're going through all these different scenarios and things where you have to meet this challenge and that challenge, and you have to answer these questions. And basically, you're being judged on your activities in life, and then that tells where your boat's going to end up. Well, she was going along on this river of life, heading towards her death in this Egyptian boat. And on the banks, just before she reached her final destination, she saw a vision of her mother standing on the banks of the river, and she turns towards her mother, and her mother says, "You are going to give birth to a man-child, and you're going to give birth, and he's going to be a mighty man, and he's going to be well-known, and he's going to be big and powerful. You're going to have this magnificent superhuman son." Okay? She didn't tell this story until after Jim Jones got famous, so you can take it for what it is. So anyways, she already had these grandiose things, and she was going to be bigger and better than everybody else. And she instilled these ideas into her son. So he is born on May 13th. A short time later, they end up going to Lynn, Indiana, living in the shack. Well, she didn't want to be she wanted to be the mother of the mighty Jim Jones, but she didn't want to be a mother to the mighty Jim Jones. So she actually just basically abandons him. She has to work, and they live in this shack. There's nothing really in the shack. There's no curtains, there's no nothing. It's just a building that they can sleep in to stay out of the cold. And that's basically all it is. They don't have a lot of food. They didn't have any clothes hardly. They didn't have anything that they needed. And Jim, he was known as Jimmy at that time. Jimmy just wandered the streets. He wandered the streets. Sometimes he didn't have enough clothes. Sometimes he did. He never had enough food. Well, his neighbors, there were some neighborhood women around the area that would take pity on him and give him charity. So he would have some clothes, and they would bring him in for food, and they tried to take care of him because he was just a lost child wandering the streets, and he was getting into trouble. So they were trying to do good and trying to help this poor pitiful boy, and he meets one specific neighbor that would change the course of his history. So as a young boy, he meets this neighbor. Her name's Myrtle Kennedy. Now, Myrtle Kennedy was a good Nazarene woman. She went to the Church of Nazarene in that area, and she was a good Bible-believing church goer. And she wanted to teach Jim Jones about the Bible. She said every child should have this opportunity to learn about God in their childhood, because the Bible does say, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they shall not depart from it. Okay, so she started reading scripture to the boy on the front porch while she's feeding him food. Now, of course, that's not manipulative at all. The boy's starving to death. Of course, he's going to sit here and listen to you read while he's getting food. So, anyways, past that. So she's sitting there reading the scriptures to him, and she's astonished because Jim Jones was actually fairly intelligent. Not only was he able to listen, but he was able to memorize and recite long passages of scripture even as a child. And so she thought this was great. So she took him to church with her, and everything was going well. Well, he found that he enjoyed watching the preacher. He didn't care about God. He would completely disown God and call himself an agnostic and an atheist. And he didn't believe in, he'd make fun of it and call it the sky god. And he did all kinds of things like this later, but he didn't believe in any of it. But he loved this one fact. He was fascinated that one man at the front of the church could speak for potentially hours, and everybody in this building was entranced with what this man had to say. This one man had ultimate control over this group of people, and he wanted that. He loved it, and he wanted to see how he could do it. So he started going to every church in town. Anytime he could find a way, he would go to every church, and he came across a charismatic Pentecostal service. Now, these were the hooping and hollering type services, and there was one really charismatic preacher up front, and that guy could really hold a crowd. He could make the crowd cry. He could make the crowd shout. He could make the crowd dance. He could make the crowd sing. And this was a power that the young Joseph Jeffers craved, and he wanted it with everything that he had. And that's what he would become. He would become a ostracized, it's not quite the right word. He would become a corrupted vision of what he saw in that church. He wanted that power over the crowd. You'll also find out that he studied a lot. He'd go to the library and he would read all of the books. And he loved anyone that could hold a crowd. He wanted to mesmerize a group of people and have that control. And so guess who his hero was? Hitler. Yeah, unfortunately. This person that we were told for decades that was just a good charismatic preacher who turned out bad somehow was a fan of Hitler. He loved socialism and communism, and he believed in all of these things with all of his heart, and he loved how Hitler could entice a crowd, and he wanted that. He wanted to control a group of people. And so he wanted this from a childhood stance on. So he started doing a lot of disturbing things. Guys, I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you sharing and liking and subscribing. I appreciate your support a lot. Please make sure and check out my sponsor, Bones Coffee Company. I've got their cup here. I absolutely love it. I've got Bones Coffee stuff all over the place. Here is, they have some pre-made iced coffee. This is Cinnabon. This is one of my favorites. I love their Cinnabons. Now, their iced coffee does have sugar in it, so watch out for that if you have any sugar issues. But most of everything else they have is sugar-free. So, but check out Bones Coffee Company. They so graciously sponsor my show, sponsor Synova Inc. Publishing, and every time you buy coffee or you buy a book from me, it's more than just a cup of coffee, and it's more than a book. You're showing support for a local business owner. You're showing support for someone who's trying to make a difference. Now, you can buy books and coffee anywhere you choose, from anyone you choose, but does that person or that corporation actually care for the victim's family members? I can't say they do or they don't, but I can tell you in this business, in Synova Inc. Publishing, I care completely for the victim's family members. Everything I write, everything I make, I have them in my mind at all times trying to help. So if you enjoy my content at all, please like, subscribe, share. That really helps. And if you can afford to, please check out some coffee. Check out one of my books. My books are all available on Amazon. They're all $20 or less, and you can get the ebooks for less than a cup of coffee. So please check out my sponsors and check out my books. It really helps out. Thank you for watching. From extreme fundamentalist ideologies to the paranormal and the occult, Dr. Joseph Jeffers' message integrated with the times and incited a religious fervor amongst his followers. In the 1930s, he was causing war in Arkansas and inciting violence that would lead to the death of one man and the attempted murder of a local preacher. In the 1940s, he was making headlines in LA for his lewd house parties. In the 1950s, his third wife would be brutally murdered, and her homicide would go unsolved. In the 1960s, he would make headlines in Arizona when he gambled off all of the church funds at the racetrack. In the 1970s, he would be prophesying great and mighty things to do with UFOs and the Bermuda Triangle. But by 1978, he would be building a pyramid to withstand the apocalypse in the state of Missouri. And by 1988, he would die of old age. No one ever stopped this man from stealing millions of dollars, coercing innocent young women, or hiring hitmen to kill his wives. Read this book to find out more about the crimes, the chaos, and the injustice in the life of Dr. Joseph D. Jeffers. How could this man have gotten away with so many crimes? And how could he have flown under the radar? After making so many ludicrous headlines, how do we not know the name of Joseph Jeffers? So we're going to continue on. Now, we're going to talk about some of the disturbing things that Jim Jones did in his childhood. Now, we have stories of him locking some of his friends in the barn and not letting them out because they wanted to leave before he was ready for them to leave. We've got some disturbing things where he shot a kid with a BB gun just so he could watch how this kid responded. We've got some pretty serious things going on, but we also have something that I find that fits him square right in the middle of the psychopathy checklist. And we're going to go over the psychopathy checklist at the end of this to kind of see how he rates on the psychopathy scale. You can actually print this out yourself, but there is a checklist that you can actually look through and go through piece by piece and see if he ranks on this. And so we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But some of the strange things that he did. Now, I told you he had gone to these churches and seen how the pastor controls the crowd, how he can manipulate the crowd. Now, if you go to some of those Southern style Pentecostal churches, the pastor can be fiery and excited, and the crowd gets excited. The pastor can be downtrodden and prayerful, and the crowd gets prayerful. They kind of feed off of the emotions of the speaker, and in reality, that's the way most crowds work. That's not just in some kind of church. That is actually the way it works. In most crowds, you have a band that's playing pepped up music. The crowd's going to be pepped up. You have a band playing depressive music. The crowd's going to be more tame. So that's how crowds are controlled anyways, is by the emotional output of whoever is speaking, whoever's on stage. But Joseph Jeffers, I guarantee you, didn't know much about psychology. He just knew that person had power over these people, and he wanted to be in that man's situation. So he was going to create that. So he's a child, he wants to create this. So what does he do? He decides he's going to have funeral services and host funeral services for people's pets. Okay, he's a child. All right. Well, he has the neighbor's pet. The cat dies, whatever it is. He will host a funeral service for this, and the kids will come around. If he's got 3 or 4 kids, at least he's happy. And he would expound upon anything he could think of to talk about for over an hour. And if the kids wanted to go home, he would get angry. And he would not let them leave. And at one point, one of his friends he locked in the barn because you were not going to leave until Jim Jones said you could leave. And he might expound over this cat for 2 hours. And he wanted to practice. He was enticed by how far can I push these people? So he wanted to do these funerals, and he was known to do these funerals for any kind of roadkill he found. And then what's even more disturbing, if he didn't have something that was already dead, he would kill it. One of his friends actually saw him kill a cat with a knife just so he could go ahead and do the funeral services for this cat. Now that puts him square in the middle of the psychopathy checklist. Cruelty to animals. Now this is what's so crazy. Fast forward a few years, and he's got this facade of loving everybody and this facade of loving animals. And you'll see in some of the old newsreels, this one person was talking about, oh, he had such an affinity for animals. He just loved nature, and he loved animals. He sold monkeys at one time, and oh, he just loved those monkeys. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, well, if he wanted to do a funeral service, just watch, keep all your pets alive, you know. At a certain age, I guess he fell in love with animals, but at this point in time, he was slaughtering them so he could have hours worth of funeral services with these people that he was conning into coming. And he was known to be standing out in the middle of the wooded area on a stump, preaching to nobody. And people would come in, hear something, they would come in, and he's out there shouting at the top of his lungs about, you're gonna go to hell for sinning. And he will shout it to the top of his lungs to nobody. Now, all of this is disturbing, but you're gonna find that his mother kind of bred more and more into him. There was times where she said, you can't let the man hold you down. Now, she was in a time where women were oppressed, and African Americans were oppressed, and so many people were oppressed. So you can't let the man hold you down might actually be good advice. But she takes it to extremes. She has to add a little bit of her psychosis in it, okay? So when did she give her son this advice? When he's going to go for this job interview and he doesn't do well, and it falls apart, and he's all sad and depressed and is going to give up, and she says, don't let the man hold you down, try again. No. She does it after he steals from the local store. He decides he wanted something in that store, and he just walked out the door with it. When they tried to talk to his mom about it, instead of saying stealing is bad, she said, I'm proud of you. You saw what you wanted and you took it. She worked out a deal with the local shop owner to keep track of how much he takes, and she would pay him at the end of the month. So instead of encouraging her child to not steal, she said, go take what you want, because you are supposed to be this great and mighty man. Okay? So this is where we're seeing this level of psychosis, some that he already has and some that may have been bred into him from his mother's tutelage, which he got very, very little of. Now, you're going to hear how this man, he rode the wave of social injustice. He rode it till the day he died. He saw segregation as evil, and it is. Segregation is evil. Racism is flat out evil. To me, there's no race. We're all come from one source. We're all human beings. So to me, I don't fathom racism. I don't get it. But he rode a wave of social reform, but he rode it to mask his true purpose. His true purpose was manipulation, control, extortion, blackmail, sexual preferences. I mean, he did everything he could, including murder, in behind this facade of social injustice. And people's like, well, how could he be so good and then do something so bad? And this doesn't make any sense. Well, I'm going to contend that what I'm about to show you, what I'm about to tell you, proves that he was bad from the beginning. Now, while Jim Jones tries to put on this front of social equality, he wants to right a wrong in our society, and I think everybody should want that. I don't think there's anybody that is a human being that shouldn't want social equality amongst humans. I mean, we're all one human race. I have found a story from his childhood that I believe shows his true purpose. See, he rode this wave because that's what was politically that was the trending thing to do at the time. See, that was what people were pushing for. See, he would later compare himself to Kennedy. He would later compare himself to Martin Luther King. What the heck does he have in common with Martin Luther King? But he was trying to set himself up as someone like Martin Luther King. And of course, he had nothing in common with Martin Luther King. What the heck did he know about it? So this is the ego that we're dealing with here. But I'm show you that this little story that I found from his childhood, I think shows his truth. If you dig far enough, you can look through a con man's games and look through their facade and find their nugget of truth. And I think his nugget of truth was he wanted attention, he wanted control, he wanted included, because he didn't have any of those things. He didn't have control over his life. He didn't have attention from his parents. He didn't have any kind of acceptance or anything like that. So he wanted those things. So he was going to manufacture those things and try to fulfill them himself, okay? But he did it in a dreadful way. Now, he started riding the wave of social injustice. He wanted racial equality. Everybody should want that. But here's the problem. He decided the way to do it was preach it from on the street corners. Now, I'm sorry, but anybody who preaches on the street corners shouting at a crowd isn't going to be all that effective. It might be slightly annoying, and so here I'm telling you this. I was raised in a very religious family. I do have my own belief systems, all this, but I'm thinking that is not the most effective way of doing things. You're going to incite more violence and more aggravation than you're going to get salvations most of the time. So I'm not a fan of the shouting on the street corner type of preaching. You can have your opinions, I'll have mine, and we'll be okay. But the idea is shouting from the street corner about social injustice. So he is trying to say, wake up, we need to be more, we need to get rid of segregation. Wonderful message, wonderful thing to say. But he doesn't preach it on his street corner in the white neighborhood. He goes to the black neighborhood and preaches it. What freaking good is that going to do? He's preaching to the freaking choir. He's not preaching in the location that's actually going to bring forth the results that his words say. So see, that's one of the red flags you need to look for when you might think you might be getting mixed up in some kind of manipulative situation, or you might think, well, maybe I'm part of a cult. That's manipulation right there. He is saying one thing, his actions are something else. His saying we need social reform. Of course, everyone in the black neighborhood is going to agree with him because they want that too. He should be shouting it on the street corner in the white neighborhood to change the white people's minds. He doesn't have to change the black people's minds. They already agree with him. So automatically he's manipulating things. He's a teenager shouting what everybody else is already thinking in a neighborhood that's thinking the same way he is. So that's a safe way to say that he's doing something. How many times do you see people say, well, I want this to change in society. I want, this to change, in our laws or in our system or in our government or whatever. And they say that, but then they go to a safe, quiet little place and whisper it over here. Nobody wants to get up and do anything in the place that it needs to be done. And so I contend if he was really caring about the African American community, he would have done it in the white neighborhood, okay? But he didn't. He did it in the black neighborhood. So to me that shows he didn't care as much as he says he cared. But that is just one more thing. Now, I told you that he was a fan of Hitler's. Now, he was so much a fan of Hitler's that he would get these few little kids from the neighborhood together, and he would make them goose step in line. And if they didn't goose step like Hitler's troops, he would whack them with a switch, and until they got upset enough to go home. And then he would do everything he could to prolong them from going home. And so this is the kind of childhood that we have, that he's growing up in, and we want to see that he didn't have any parents. He didn't have any parenting at home. He had an abusive childhood. He had all these things. But was he born that way, or did he become that way because of the situation? I don't know. This is something that we will have to go over. So I'm going to go over this psychopathy checklist with you. And then we will talk about where we think it is. Now, when you have this psychopathy checklist, it's a checklist of 20 things. And this checklist just goes over, and you give a ranking of 0, 1, or 2. So if they have slightly this trait, then you give them a 1. If they have a lot of it, it's 2. If you're not sure, or if they don't, you have 0. So we're going to talk about this. The first one is glibness or superficial charm. That is one thing that I say he has a 2 on, because that was one thing that even his teachers noticed in school. He had a way of getting people to do things that for him that they didn't really want to do, and he loved it. He just ate it up. If he could force somebody to do something against their will, he just loved it. So I'd say he had a 2, because he knew how to charm the middle-aged housewives around to get the clothes and the food and everything he needed. He knew how to charm people. 2, a grandiose sense of self-worth. His mom even told him he was going to be great and mighty. Which, I mean, every mom does. Oh, you can do anything you want. You know, and try to push them forward. But, you know, the whole idea of you can steal whatever you want because you need to take what you see that you like. And I'll just cover for you. That's no good. Okay, so need for stimulation, prone to boredom. Absolutely. He was going to create that stimulation by doing more funeral services. He had to be actively doing something. He had to be actively, preaching on the tree stump to the forest. You know, he had to be doing this. So I would say that's another 2. Pathological lying. I have no idea on that one from childhood. But I do know that he was a pathological liar later in life. So this one, I'm going to say 1, because that kind of behavior doesn't start in adulthood. Most of the time, it's all the way through. So I would say 1 on that one. I'm kind of conning and manipulative. 2. Lack of remorse or guilt. He didn't give a crap that he shot that kid with a BB gun. The kid said he turned around and he had this really mischievous, almost evil grin on him. He just wanted to see what happened to this kid and how this kid would respond. Later on, he would run tests. See, people don't realize that he didn't make them drink the poison Kool-Aid, which we say Kool-Aid, it was actually the off-brand Flavor Aid, but that he didn't make them drink that poison Kool-Aid out of the blue. He had practice runs of that. For years in advance, he had practiced poisoning these people. So, where was I at? Lack of remorse or guilt. Absolutely, 2. Shallow effect. Absolutely. Absolutely. Completely shallow. As of, he didn't give 2 cents about anything else as long as he had his base needs met. Callous or lack of empathy. Again, 2. Parasitic lifestyle. Again, especially during childhood, 2, because he was living off of everybody else and instead of himself. Poor behavioral control. 2. Promiscuous sexual behavior. That we're going to have to leave blank, because at this time in his childhood, I don't know that he engaged in that. I don't know. I do know he got married as a teenager. He met the woman that he wanted. She was 4 years older than him. He met her when he's 15. They got married when he turned 18. I don't know if he had conned her into doing anything beforehand, but she was highly religious, so I doubt it. That doesn't mean he wasn't getting some on the side, so I don't know. We'll wait on that one. Early behavioral problems, too. Lack of realistic long-term goals. I'm going to have to put 0 on that one, because he wanted to be a preacher, somebody up front to control. Impulsivity, 2. Irresponsibility, 2. Failure to accept responsibility. He didn't have to, because his mom told him he could do whatever he wanted to, and there was no responsibility whatsoever. Many short-term marital relationships. That would be a 0. Later on in life, he would have many short-term affairs, but he stayed married to the same woman because that was the social norm of the day, and he had to keep this facade in place. So did he have lots of partners? Absolutely. But at this point, we're going to have to put 0 because we're doing his childhood right now. Juvenile delinquency, actually that is a 0. He actually excelled in school and graduated 6 months early, which just fed into his ego. Revocation of conditional release. We're going to say 0 on that. Criminal versatility. We're going to go ahead and say, 1 on that, because he was killing, he was shooting, and he was stealing. So that is versatile. So let's see. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28. So he scored 28 out of 30. He scored 28 out of 30. 28 out of 40, sorry. So he scored 28 out of 40 even as a child. Now, we'll run this test again later, because some of these things I could say definitely yes on. I could say definitely yes on later. So, but even as a child, he scored 28 out of 40. So I would definitely say he is in the psychopath range, even as a child. Now, to fight over was he born that way or made into that way, is something that you would have to get an actual psychiatrist to argue with, and which is a good luck on that one, because every psychologist has varying differences of opinion, but basically a psychopath is born that way. They're hardwired. Their brain actually is manufactured slightly different. You can find that in autopsy results, but a sociopath is actually someone who became that way because of the way they were raised, because of trauma and sort of things, and their brain looks slightly different. So the only way you can find out for sure is after they're deceased, if you decide to biopsy the brain. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to worry about that. Of course, Jim Jones was cremated, and I found out he was scattered in the ocean. I'm like, oh man. Poor fish. So anyways, I was that's what I've got for you today. I'm going to go over and show you all kinds of things throughout this series. I hope we learned something. I hope to me, I am a religious person. I am a spiritual person. So I find these studies disturbing, because there's going to be scriptures that this man is going to literally use to coerce people into dying. And it's disgusting. And to me, it's just heart-wrenching that somebody could use something like this to kill people. And that's what I really want to get through to you guys when you get through with all of this series, is just because something has a religious label over it, just because something has a beautiful label, of trying to correct social injustice, that was a beautiful label, that Jim Jones had. Just because it has these good works and this community mindset, just because it has, all these great humanitarian things out front, if there's evil in the heart of the center of that organization, it will come out. It will expose itself. And unfortunately, the evil in the heart of the man behind the People's Temple came out in Jonestown. And if we can somehow learn to catch something along the way, those red flags, if we can just find what those are, maybe if we can keep one person from falling into one of these devastating situations, we might actually be saving a life. And so, to me, that's why I'm covering these. There are so many crimes of Joseph Jeffers Joseph Jeffers. There are so many parallels between Joseph Jeffers, which is the last cult leader I talked about, and Jim Jones, that I keep crossing their names. It's uncanny how many times I've done that. But Jim Jones, we're going to talk a lot about him over the next few weeks, and hopefully we can actually spare somebody from the torment of joining a cult in the first place. Now, next week, we're going to be talking about his young adult life. We're going to talk about his marriages. We're going to talk about how he did something really good, and how he adopted children of different races, and how he actually adopted the first white family to adopt a black child in Indiana. We're going to talk about some of those things, but we're also going to start seeing some of the disturbing things that happened before he even gets to California. So next week, make sure and sign on and watch. This story is going to continue for a while, and it's going to be a disturbing ride. I hope to see you there. Bye, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by Bones Coffee Company. You can forget about boring coffee when you drink Bones Coffee. Not only do they offer a variety of flavors such as strawberry cheesecake and maple bacon, they are a family-owned company that puts great detail not only in their coffee, but in the artwork that comes on each individual bag. Bones Coffee has a coffee club that will deliver your favorite coffee to your door every month. If that wasn't enough, they also have some amazing swag to offer. Check out Bones Coffee Company today. I'll have my affiliate links in the show notes for you.